Now we have New York Times bestselling author of the young adult memoir, I Have Something to Tell You, and husband of Pete Buttigieg, Chasten Buttigieg. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course. So I do want to get into the book, and we have a lot to talk about there. But first, just sticking with the news for a moment, Tucker Carlson's been fired from Fox News. Tucker mocked your husband, Pete, for taking paternity leave and also made some off-color remarks about breastfeeding. What was the reaction that you guys had at home to Tucker using, the biggest platform on the biggest conservative media outlet in the biggest primetime slot to say those things? And also, how did that impact you guys at home?
Well, I mean, those things certainly are disappointing, and not just because they're directed at our family, but because they're directed at an entire community. What really bothers me is when people use that type of bigotry and that type of hate to go after already vulnerable people. I'm a grown-up. I've learned to armor myself after years of being an out gay man, but it's especially young people that I worry about. And folks on that network who use their platform to spread hate, but not only hate, misinformation, fear, certainly do a disservice to the country, do a disservice to journalism itself, and also to the ideas of freedom. The
same ideas that they pride themselves on espousing, by the way.
Sure, very, very slim, narrow ideas of what that looks like for everybody. So, I get it. We're a high-profile couple. We're a high-profile LGBTQ couple, and so you can expect that kind of nonsense to come from places like that. But I guess we don't have to worry about it coming from him anymore.
That's fair enough. Well, I guess the second part of that is, how did that impact you at home while it was happening? Did it have any impact at all? Or, this still is the biggest conservative media platform.
Sure.
So I guess what impact did that have?
Yeah, at the time, it didn't really have much of an impact because I know who I am. My husband knows who he is. We know why we wanted to become parents in the first place. These are the people who say they support adoption, right? We adopted 2 prematurely born twins, and in those early days, for anybody who is a parent, that it's no vacation and you're working really hard and not a lot of sleep, and so for the very slim time that you're on social media and you see something like that, it's just, you know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it and the good that comes out of being a really good family. And that kind of stuff, especially Pete is very good at saying, that doesn't need to come to the dinner table right now. Or those people don't have to be at our dinner table right now. And the other thing about him is I guess it's not the bigotry that brought him down though. In the end, it's all about money. So it's not like Fox finally stood up and said, we've been too mean. Yeah. Maybe it's time to be on the right side of history. It's all about the pocketbook. So it's not what he was saying.
To that point, there was a recent moment where I believe it was Marjorie Taylor Greene and sorry to trudge in the bowels of all the toxicity of the right, but there was a moment where Marjorie Taylor Greene came forward and derided a guest during a hearing who said that she was basically the stepmother to her partner's child, and she castigated her and suggested that she wasn't a real mother. Did that have a similar strike a similar chord?
And maybe it's because we have been conditioned to just expect this kind of hatred and small-mindedness from them. Yeah. The first thing I thought when I saw that was I reached out to Randy Weingarten, and said that, those are bogus comments. The second thing I was thinking was, keep running your mouth. Please keep talking. Because the party that says they're the party of family values continuously goes after families that, are outside of what they expect to be the norm, right? They have made so many poor choices over the last couple of years. And I think about families back home in Michigan, families who aren't spending all day on Twitter, who aren't on social media all day, who are just trying to go to work, raise their kids, do a good job raising their family, and they're not focusing on the 24/7 news cycle. And somebody swings in and says, this high-profile Republican says that adoptive parents aren't real parents. How do you think that's actually going to resonate with voters? When we had a baby formula shortage in this country, one party stood up, put a bill on the floor to make it easier to get baby formula in this country. And the Republicans voted against it. The child tax credit lifted millions of kids out of poverty. The Republicans voted against it. So if you can keep saying you're the party of family values, you don't have much to show for it when every time you are given an opportunity to show that you actually support American families, you go in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly put. And I especially resonate with what you were saying in terms of just for someone like that and these other extremists within the Republican Party, of which there are more and more, to keep doing it and not to look at us to basically sanitize that party by ignoring them, for example. It's like if they want to make these people the faces of that party, these known extremists, these people who push away everybody that's not part of that 29% of their base, then far be it from me to help them by ignoring her. Like if she wants to come out and say these things, if the Lauren Boeberts and the Matt Gaetzes and Jim Jordans, all these characters want to come out and continue doing what they do and just pushing, saying things that would push the vast majority of Americans away, then I'll continue to broadcast it, because I think it's important for people to know when they cast their ballots who they're empowering by virtue of doing it. Like it's like if Republicans want to make Marjorie Taylor Greene the face of that party, then even when you cast a ballot for some self-proclaimed moderate in that party, it's not going to be the moderates who have the power there. It's going to be the people who Kevin McCarthy himself has empowered, like Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Well, I think it's really important to note that nobody in Republican leadership has denounced any of the bigotry that comes out of their mouth. So, there's a difference between saying, hey, that's not who we are, that's not what we support. And so the thing for me, thinking about, young families, teachers, maybe people who are swing voters and who are just looking for a party and wondering where they belong and who's going to stick up for them right now, as a former teacher myself, as a young dad, as somebody who believes in public education, who believes in supporting families, who believes in lifting people out of poverty, who believes in making life easier, not harder for people. I know what party believes in those things and what party fights for those things. And on the other side, you see a party who has given the reins of control over to these really radical voices. And I think they're making a really big mistake. And so, yes, it is hurtful. Yes, it's oftentimes vile, especially when they're directed at already vulnerable people. But, they clearly didn't learn anything from the midterms. And so from a strictly political standpoint, keep talking, because you're losing voters left and right. Yeah. I think people are just exhausted with that, exhausted with the noise. People want to know that they belong. People want to know that people are going to Washington to fight for them. And instead, Washington has just become this content farm for them. I realize that's ironic talking about on a podcast, but some of these people probably make more money on their podcasts than they do, in the Senate or the House. So they go to their committees, they say something wild, so they can go talk about their podcast, or they can talk about it on late night TV.
Right. Their jobs are just in service of their personas that they have.
Of their content.
Media.
Yeah, not the American people.
Right.
Because they're already, I'm sorry, I got on my soapbox, didn't I?
No,
they're so out of touch with the American people. They're out of touch with their own party.
Yeah.
Every time we have the gun debate, it's like a vast majority of Republicans want us to do something about gun safety in this country, and here we are talking about beer bottles and drag queens.
A major reason why those culture war issues are propped up again is because of Fox. And I know that there's been some debate in terms of when Pete would go on Fox. And on one side, people would say, well, any appearance on a network like Fox News is bad because it validates that network. It legitimizes that network by virtue of him going on. On the flip side, people say, well, people are there anyway. And, it would benefit us to have somebody who at least does a good job when he does go on, and there's no doubt, objectively, regardless of whether you're on the right or left, that Pete does a hell of a good job when he does go on. So where do you stand on that, and was that ever a conversation that you all had at home?
Oh, yeah, we have that conversation all the time, especially when he goes on there. The last time, or one of the last times he was on there, they had come up with some wild story about when I joined Pete on a presidential delegation.
Yes, was that Brett Baer who asked about that?
Yes. So
and he had a pretty kick-ass answer about how it's never been an issue prior to that.
Right. Yeah. So that I appreciate him going on there and setting the record straight, because there are people who, like it or not, probably tune into Fox News in good faith. Mm-hmm. And you got to meet them where they're at and show them that there's a better way. And I certainly appreciate as his spouse when he sticks up for me too. But there's a reason why they focus so much on our family. But yeah, it's valid argument. But I think I'm a pretty good cheerleader in his corner when he goes on there and sets the record straight.
So your book tour for this book starts on May 10th. The book itself comes out on the 16th, but the tour starts on the 10th. You'll be going to a number of places where LGBT book bans are currently in place. So I guess how was that decision in terms of deciding to go to these places? And do you anticipate any hostility there?
Super easy decision. I knew that it mattered to go to these places where a tour might not show up, go to these places where people might feel overlooked, and go to places where we need to be part of the conversation. That's why I'm excited to go to places like Texas, Florida, Missouri, Utah. I wish I could go to more cities, but I can't be away from the kids that long. But I think it's a really important time in our community to go out there and have these conversations about what teachers are doing, what real family rights are, and how asinine book bans are. Yeah. So we'll go to the your standard book tour stops. I'm really excited to have an event back home in Michigan, especially because I know some of the people that are going to be in that room are the people that I was running away from, 16, 17 years ago. To celebrate that progress and to celebrate community. And I hope that is what we feel across the country, that at least for an hour we can all come together, celebrate community, and celebrate doing the right thing.
I want to read an excerpt from the book.
Uh-oh.
So, no, it was a good one. Running for president is hard work. Beyond the brutal schedule and high stakes, I wasn't prepared for what having to exist in public would do to me, the stress it would put on my family and friends, or the weight that being everything for everyone all the time would have on my mental health. I didn't know just how terrible and invasive people could be on the internet, and I especially wasn't prepared for the threats of violence. When you're on the national stage, it can feel as if everything you do, everywhere you go, and everything you say is being examined through a magnifying glass. So that really stuck out at me because, I think that nobody really has the capacity to imagine what it would be like until you're in the thick of it. It's like being the main character on the internet for a moment. And I think that it's pretty universally accepted that is a terrible thing if you land there.
Yeah.
So can you just kind of expand on that, if there were any moments that especially stuck out at you while you were writing something like that? I mean, I know not everything was positive there, but while you were writing that, what really came to mind first?
I wanted to share my story authentically, and I wanted to be vulnerable because I think when we are vulnerable, we show people, a little peek behind the curtain that it's not always easy being in the public spotlight. Also for me, I never anticipated being in this seat in life ever. Yeah. And I wanted people to understand what it was like, on that campaign, but also just in life. One of the most important things about this book is having an honest conversation with young people and hopefully teachers and parents about what it would have meant to grow up in an accepting and welcoming environment, but also reflecting on some of those experiences from being such a publicly known person and how I actually learned more about myself reflecting on my youth and how I leaned into those things that I thought made me, embarrassing when I was young, actually helped me when I was helping my husband run for president and now just being this known person, I guess. But I think, especially in this season of politics, there's so much artifice around politics and power and celebrity. And like we were talking about the content farm of Washington, D.C., I wanted to have a really honest conversation with the reader about all of that and also how we're not necessarily defined by the opinions of other people, our surroundings, and how you might look on television or on social media and you might see the world one way, but it doesn't have to be that way. We can be part of the change. We can make we can make like direct change in our communities by choosing not to embrace that, but by choosing a different path. So there's so much in there about mental health and politics. And for me, certainly I wanted to reflect authentically and truthfully about where I'm at in life right now, where I was at when I was younger, and where I hope that we can all go together. But I certainly didn't feel like I could do that by just pretending that, you know, I grew up, I did it all the right way, everything was perfect, and now I'm famous, I guess, you know? I think we get to feel less alone and feel like we belong when we see someone use their platform like that and say like, hey, there were a lot of bumps in my road too, and I didn't have it all figured out. And certainly more people know my name than I ever thought they would, but it doesn't mean that I, you know, have it all figured out or have stopped learning or growing, you know?
Was there anybody that you encountered, you know, since you've written this book or your other book, that maybe it impacted or changed their way of thinking, and maybe if they had somebody in their family who you know was a gay kid or something like that it changed how they viewed other people?
Something that has meant a lot to me after writing this book is just how many more conversations I've had with my parents. My mom called me a couple weeks ago after she had finished the book, and she said, I just wish I could have saved you from all that pain. That has certainly meant something to me to know that this book meant something to her, that she has learned more about me as a person, but the conversations that we've had about some of that trauma and some of that pain and how remarkable it is that we're still in one another's lives. I hope parents will benefit from this book. I wrote it for young people, but I really do hope that parents will read it, because I think it will help them understand maybe what their young person might be going through, whether they're LGBTQ or not. Just a young person who feels like a fish out of water, feels different, who feels like they, you know, can't find their way or their group or any of that. Just that very, very, very special bond with my parents. And then the people in my community in Traverse City who have rallied around this book and our event. I've had people come forward and donate seats so that like area youth can come for free and get a free copy of the book. And from some people that, like I said, I was running away from them. You know, I thought I was going to have to leave Traverse City and never look back. And now I'm going home to do this big event, you know, coming home. And it's really incredible. Outside of that, I've met so many people along the way who have thanked me. Sometimes it's at the grocery store, it's at Target, and it like comes out of nowhere, and they say, you know, I've got a gay son, or my daughter recently came out, and I read your book, and it just means the world to me. And that is like, you know, it sort of ruins your day, because then you get really emotional, and you're like thinking about it. It doesn't ruin the day, it just sidelines the day, right? Where you're like, yeah, I did write that book, and it is out there, and it's just weird that people approach you, and it's really, really special to know that even one person read it and made a difference. Yeah.
What does it mean that this book, or I guess to what extent did the fact that we're contending with this onslaught of attacks against the LGBT community right now, did that play in writing this book?
Well, I started writing the book over 2 years ago, and certainly did not see the book coming out in this season of politics. And that's how fast our politics changes, right? And the topic du jour is LGBTQ people. Again, and had no idea that the book would be coming out amidst hundreds and hundreds of anti-LGBTQ laws, book bans.
You really hit the holy grail of censored, like forbidden content here.
That's why when we were planning the tour, it was like, I guess we're gonna expand the tour, and we're gonna go have those conversations in some areas where folks really need us to show up. And I certainly am excited to use the platform and continue talking about how there's a better way, how our politics can be more inclusive and accepting, and speaking up for teachers and parents and families. but did not anticipate this at all.
You spoke about being accepted into a program in Germany, and you mentioned the language barrier while you were discussing that. Do you have any stories that stick out in terms of just like abject humiliation because of that language barrier?
Oh man. Well, I had 2 host families at the end of my year who didn't really speak English. So those months were basically just all horror. You just be trying to say something really basic and they look mortified, and you realize that you've said something off color. And that was such a formative chapter in my life. That's why I chose to write about it. But I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but I do remember often the expression of confusion and terror on my host parents' faces when I would come into the kitchen or something and ask a question, and I'm like, I don't think you're saying what you mean to say.
I lived in France for 2 years after I graduated college, and I went in like super. I mean, I had taken French in school for years, and I went in super confident. And I had a few of those moments. I remember one time I asked for what is it? I wanted like I guess it was some type of strawberry like applesauce or something, or like jam, and it's compote is apple is like jam,
oh, no.
And then fraise is strawberry, and I think I wanted un compote fraise, and instead I asked for un capote fraise, which is a capote is condom, so I basically asked for a strawberry flavored condom instead of jam, and
where was this?
I actually that was to a stewardess on a plane.
She's like, sorry, sir, we don't have those on board.
On my she's like yeah.
I grew up in Traverse City, Michigan, cherry capital of the world, and the word for church and cherry are very similar in German. So I believe it's Kirche and Kirche. And so I remember early on telling people like, I come from the cherry capital of the world, but I believe multiple times I would say like, I come from the church capital of the world. And they're like, this kid's not from the Vatican.
Yeah. You're like, here I am.
Yeah.
I had another one where the difference between monter and montrer, which is to mount and to show. And so I think like one time I was like, hey, I bought something at the store today. And I wanted to say like, I'm going to show you now. Instead I was like, I'm going to mount you now. So yeah, there was a lot of those. There was definitely a lot of those. But that's why I figured I would stick to an English speaking podcast. Okay, so let's end with this. Where do you and Pete see yourselves in 5 years?
Oh man, I don't know. I'm craving family time. It's been tough, like with the kids and stuff. He works so much. He's really good at being home like 6:30 on the dot. Like comes home, takes off the suit. He'll like put a pair of gym shorts on so he can start bath time, because bath time with twins is just like it's like splash stuff. Yeah. But like we have fast breakfast in the morning and we have bath time at night. And I'm really craving more time as a family, and I'm conscious of the fact that I selfishly want to like drag him away from Washington as fast as I can. And then I'm aware that
the flip side of that, which is of course a lot of people
you see democracy to people who make a mockery of it. So I'm grateful for his service. I obviously think he's brilliant, and selfishly I'm just kind of focused on being a good dad and hoping that we have more time together as a family. Myself personally, I'm really excited for this, and then I've been working on a children's book, so try not to put the cart before the horse, but have really enjoyed writing. And now that I'm reading to my kids like multiple books a day, I've started noticing this like massive gap in children's lit with where stories just don't reflect families like ours. So hopefully there'll be a little bit of that, and more time in the woods up in Michigan. But who knows, man? It's like I said, writing this 2 years ago, I had no idea this is what politics would be like. So I'll just stay in the good fight and see what happens.
All right, well, we'll leave it there. Again, the book is I Have Something to Tell You, goes on sale May 16th. Chasten, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.